The gunshot that rang out through the Crystal Palace Saloon in Colorado City, Colorado Territory, on that sweltering July evening in 1878 changed everything, though not in the way anyone expected. Jolene Jenkins ducked behind the mahogany bar as splinters of wood exploded above her head, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been serving whiskey to a table of miners when two drunken ranch hands started arguing over a card game, and now bullets were flying. This was the third shooting this month, and she was tired. Tired of the violence, tired of the leering men, tired of the smoke and the noise and the constant fear that lived in her chest like a stone. When Sheriff Morrison finally hauled the troublemakers out into the street, Jolene stood up slowly, brushing sawdust from her red satin dress. The other saloon girls had already returned to their posts, painted smiles back in place, but Jolene could not seem to make her face cooperate. At 22 years old, she had been working at the Crystal Palace for 4 years, ever since her father died and left her with nothing but debts. She had told herself it was temporary, that she would save enough money to leave and start fresh somewhere else, but the pay was barely enough to cover her room at the boarding house and put food in her belly. "You all right, Jolene?" asked Martha, the oldest of the saloon girls, touching her shoulder with genuine concern. "I cannot do this anymore," Jolene whispered, surprising herself with the admission. "I cannot." Martha's weathered face softened. "Then do not. Life is too short to spend it miserable." But leaving was easier said than done. Jolene had no family, no prospects, and no skills beyond pouring drinks and dodging unwanted advances. Still, as she walked back to her boarding house that night under a sky full of stars, something had shifted inside her. She would find a way out, even if she had no idea how. The next morning, Jolene woke early and walked to the general store, hoping to see if they needed help. The owner, Mr. Patterson, was kind but firm. "I appreciate you asking, Miss Jenkins, but my wife handles all the work here. Have you thought about taking in laundry? Some of the ladies in town make decent money that way." Jolene thanked him and left, her spirits sinking. She knew the so-called respectable women of Colorado City looked down on saloon girls, even though most of them had never exchanged more than 2 words with her. She was marked, tainted by association, and it did not matter that she had never done anything worse than serve drinks and endure crude jokes. She was walking past the livery stable, lost in thought, when she heard a commotion. A massive black horse was rearing and bucking in the corral, and the stable hand was backing away with his hands raised. "Easy now, easy," the man was saying, but the horse was having none of it. Jolene stopped and watched, fascinated despite herself. She had always loved horses. As a child, before her mother died, they had owned a gentle mare named Daisy who would eat apples from her hand. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. A tall man in dusty riding clothes approached the corral, moving with a quiet confidence that immediately caught her attention. He was lean and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He climbed over the fence and stood still in the center of the corral, completely calm as the horse circled him. "That is Quinton Zimmerman," said a voice beside her. Jolene turned to see old Pete, who worked at the livery. Best horse trainer in 3 territories. That black devil there threw his last owner and nearly killed him. Owner sold him cheap, and Quinton bought him this morning. "He is going to get himself hurt," Jolene said, unable to look away. Pete chuckled. "Quinton, not likely, just watch." The cowboy stood perfectly still as the horse approached, nostrils flaring. He did not reach out or make any sudden moves, he simply waited. After several long minutes, the horse took a tentative step closer, then another. Finally, he lowered his great head and allowed Quinton to touch his neck. "I will be damned," Pete muttered. Never seen that horse let anyone touch him that quick. Jolene found herself smiling for the first time in days. There was something beautiful about the way the man worked, patient and respectful, treating the dangerous animal like an equal rather than something to be broken. Quinton spent another 20 minutes with the horse before finally leading him into the stable. When he emerged, wiping his hands on his pants, his eyes met Jolene's across the yard. They were a striking shade of green, startling in his sun-weathered face. He nodded politely before turning to speak with Pete. Jolene hurried away, feeling oddly flustered. She had been around men constantly for years, but something about the cowboy's steady gaze had affected her differently. Maybe it was because he had looked at her like she was a person, not a saloon girl. Or maybe she was just losing her mind. That evening at the Crystal Palace, she could not stop thinking about the scene at the livery, about the patience and gentleness in the cowboy's manner, the way he had not forced anything. She wondered what it would be like to be treated that way, with respect and care. "Earth to Jolene," called out Sal, the bartender. "Got customers waiting." She shook herself and returned to work, but her heart was not in it. She served drinks mechanically, avoiding conversation when possible, counting the hours until she could leave. Around 9 o'clock, the door opened and Quinton Zimmerman walked in. Jolene felt her breath catch as he approached the bar, removing his hat. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver just starting to thread through his dark hair. He was probably in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the kind of solid presence that came from a life spent outdoors. "Whiskey, please," he said to Sal, his voice deep and quiet. Sal poured the drink and slid it across. "You are Quinton Zimmerman, right? Heard you bought that crazy black horse." "News travels fast," Quinton said with a slight smile. "And he is not crazy, just scared. Looked plenty dangerous to me." "Most dangerous things are just frightened things with no other choice," Quinton replied, taking a sip of his whiskey. Jolene found herself drawn to the conversation despite her better judgment. She was supposed to be serving the table in the corner, but her feet would not move. Quinton glanced over and met her eyes again. "You were watching this morning, at the livery." It was not a question, but she nodded anyway. "I was. You have a gift with horses." "Just patience," he said, "and respect. They give back what you give them." "If only people were the same way," she said before she could stop herself. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding. "Some people are. You just have to find the right ones." Before she could respond, a drunk cowboy grabbed her arm. "Hey, darling, how about you stop chatting and bring me another bottle?" Jolene pulled away, her professional smile sliding back into place. "Of course. Right away." She could feel Quinton watching her as she hurried to serve the demanding customer, and the weight of his gaze made her skin prickle with awareness. She told herself to forget about him, that he was just another customer passing through, but she could not quite manage it. Quinton stayed for one drink and left, tipping his hat to her on the way out. She watched him go and felt an inexplicable sense of loss. The next day was Sunday, Jolene's only day off. She usually spent it washing her clothes, mending her dresses, and trying to rest, but this morning she felt restless. On impulse, she walked to the small church at the edge of town. She had not attended service in years, not since the minister's wife had made it clear that saloon girls were not welcome among decent folk. But she stood outside and listened to the singing. When the service ended, she quickly walked away before anyone could see her. She wandered toward the creek that ran along the southern edge of Colorado City, following the sound of rushing water. The day was hot already, even though it was barely 9 in the morning, and she wished she could strip down and dive into the cool water like she had as a child. She was sitting on a flat rock, dangling her fingers in the current when she heard a horse approaching. She turned to see Quinton riding the black horse from yesterday, moving at an easy walk. The horse still looked spirited, tossing his head, but there was no fear in his movements now. "Morning," Quinton called, bringing the horse to a stop. "Mind if I let him drink?" "It is not my creek," Jolene said, trying to sound casual despite her suddenly racing heart. Quinton dismounted and led the horse to the water's edge. "I wanted to thank you," she blinked. "Thank me? For what?" "Yesterday, when you said I had a gift. It has been a hard few months. I needed to hear something kind." He looked at her directly, and there was an openness in his face that made her chest tighten. "What happened?" she asked, then immediately regretted it. "I am sorry, that is none of my business." "It is all right. I do not mind telling you." He sat down on a nearby rock, keeping the horse's reins loose in his hand. "I had a ranch up in Wyoming. Small place, but it was mine. I was engaged to be married, had everything planned out. Then she decided she would rather marry a banker in Cheyenne. Cannot say I blame her. Steady income, nice house in town, all the things I could not offer. She left 3 months before the wedding, and I realized I could not stay there anymore. Sold the ranch and started drifting. Ended up here." Jolene felt a pang of sympathy. "I am sorry." "That must have been painful." "It was. Still is some days, but I am starting to think maybe it was for the best. If she loved me, really loved me, she would not have left." He paused. "What about you? How did you end up working at the Crystal Palace?" Most men never asked about her life, and she found herself wanting to tell him the truth. "My father died 4 years ago and left me with nothing but debts. I needed work, and the saloon was the only place that would hire me. I told myself it was temporary, but temporary has a way of becoming permanent. You want to leave, more than anything. I just do not know how. I have no money saved, no family, nowhere to go." Quinton was quiet for a moment, watching the horse drink. "I know what it feels like to be stuck. But I also know that sometimes you just have to take a chance, even if you are scared." "Easy to say," Jolene said, but there was no bitterness in her voice. "True. Easier said than done." He stood up, preparing to mount. "I am staying at the boarding house on Main Street, Mrs. Cooper's place. If you ever need help with anything or just want to talk, you can find me there." Jolene stared at him, unsure what to make of the offer. Men at the saloon offered her things all the time, but there was always a price attached. Quinton's offer felt different, genuine, and that scared her more than the crude propositions she was used to. "Thank you," she finally said. "That is kind of you." He tipped his hat and rode off, leaving her sitting by the creek with her thoughts spinning. She had learned long ago not to trust easily, not to believe in kindness without strings attached. But something about Quinton made her want to believe again. Over the next 2 weeks, Jolene saw Quinton several more times. He came to the saloon once or twice a week, always ordering just one drink, always treating her with the same quiet respect. They did not talk much, but she was aware of his presence in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. Then one night, everything changed. A wealthy cattle buyer named Horace Drummond had been drinking heavily all evening. He was a regular at the Crystal Palace, a loud, aggressive man who thought his money gave him the right to do whatever he wanted. Jolene had been avoiding his table when possible, letting the other girls serve him, but around midnight he cornered her near the back hallway. "There you are, pretty Jolene," he slurred, backing her against the wall. "I have been trying to get your attention all night." "Please, Mr. Drummond, I need to get back to work," she said, trying to slip past him. He grabbed her wrist, his grip painful. "Not so fast. I have paid good money at this establishment, and I think I deserve a little special attention." "Let me go," she said firmly, her heart pounding. "Come on now, do not be like that." His other hand reached for her waist. "The lady asked you to let her go." Jolene looked up to see Quinton standing at the end of the hallway, his expression calm but his eyes hard as flint. "This is none of your business, Cowboy," Drummond growled. "I am making it my business. Let her go, now." Drummond released Jolene's wrist and turned to face Quinton, swaying slightly. "You do not know who you are messing with." "I know exactly who I am messing with. A drunk bully who thinks he can put his hands on a woman without her permission." Quinton's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "Walk away." For a moment, Jolene thought Drummond was going to throw a punch, but something in Quinton's stance made him reconsider. He spat on the floor and stumbled back toward the main room, muttering curses. Jolene let out a shaky breath, her legs suddenly weak. "Thank you, he has never been quite that aggressive before." "Are you all right?" Quinton asked, his expression softening with concern. "Yes, just shaken." She rubbed her wrist where Drummond had grabbed her, knowing there would be bruises tomorrow. "Let me see." Quinton gently took her hand, examining her wrist with a frown. "That is going to hurt. You should put ice on it." The careful way he held her hand, the genuine worry in his eyes, it was too much. Jolene felt tears spring up and she blinked them back furiously. She could not afford to cry, not here, not now. "I am fine," she said, pulling her hand away. "I should get back to work. Jolene." The way he said her name made her stop. "You do not have to do this. There are other ways." "What other ways? Where else can a woman with no family and no prospects go? At least here I have a roof over my head and food to eat." "You could leave Colorado City. Start fresh somewhere else." "With what money? I barely make enough to survive as it is." The tears were threatening again, and she hated herself for showing such weakness. Quinton was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him thinking. When he finally spoke, his words shocked her. "Come work for me." "What?" "I have been thinking about starting up a new ranch. There is land available for homesteading about 15 miles north of here, near a little settlement called Pinewood. I could use help, and I can pay fair wages. Room and board included." Jolene stared at him, trying to understand what he was offering. "You want me to work on a ranch? I do not know the first thing about ranching." "I can teach you. And there is more to running a ranch than just cattle work. Someone needs to manage the house, help with the horses, handle supplies." "You could learn." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because I know what it is like to feel trapped, and because I think you are worth more than this place." He said it simply, like it was obvious. Jolene felt something crack open in her chest, something she had kept carefully locked away. Hope, fragile and terrifying. "I do not even know you." "That is true, but we could get to know each other. No pressure, no expectations. Just an honest job and a chance to start over." He met her eyes. "Think about it, please." Before she could respond, Sal called her name from the main room. She looked between Quinton and the doorway, feeling like she was standing at a crossroads. "I have to go," she said. "But thank you for the offer and for helping me with Drummond." "Will you think about it?" he asked. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will think about it." She returned to work, but her mind was racing. Could she really do it? Just leave everything and take a chance on a man she barely knew? It was risky, possibly foolish, but what was her alternative? Stay at the Crystal Palace until she was too old and worn out to work, then starve in the streets. When her shift ended at 2 in the morning, she walked back to the boarding house in a daze. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the cracked plaster. Quinton's words echoed in her head. "Everyone deserves a second chance. You are worth more than this place." Was she brave enough to believe him? The next morning, Jolene made her decision. She went to the Crystal Palace and told the owner, Frank Sullivan, that she was quitting. He was not happy, threatening to withhold her last week's pay, but she stood her ground. She had done her job well for 4 years, and she deserved what she had earned. Finally, Sullivan threw the money at her and told her to get out. She picked up the coins with as much dignity as she could muster and walked out of the saloon for the last time. Then she went to Mrs. Cooper's boarding house and asked for Quinton. The landlady gave her a suspicious look, but agreed to fetch him. When he came downstairs and saw her, his face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious features. "I want to accept your offer," Jolene said before she could lose her nerve. "If it is still available." "It is absolutely still available," he said, his eyes bright. "You will not regret this, Jolene, I promise." "I hope not," she said, managing a shaky smile. "Because I just quit my job and told off my boss. There is no going back now." Quinton laughed, a warm, rich sound. "Then I guess we better get started. I was planning to ride out to Pinewood tomorrow to file the homestead claim. Can you be ready by dawn?" "I can be ready," she said, feeling a wild mixture of excitement and terror. That night, Jolene packed her few belongings into a worn carpetbag. She did not own much. A few dresses, some undergarments, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small Bible. Everything she owned fit into one bag, which was both liberating and sad. She said goodbye to Martha and a few of the other saloon girls who had been kind to her over the years. Martha hugged her tight and whispered, "You take care of yourself, girl, and if that cowboy does not treat you right, you come straight back. You will always have friends here." "Thank you," Jolene said, meaning it. The women at the Crystal Palace might not have been respectable in society's eyes, but they had shown her more kindness than most of the supposedly decent people in Colorado City. She barely slept that night, too nervous and excited. Before the sun rose, she dressed in her simplest dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days, and headed to the livery where Quinton had said to meet him. He was already there, preparing 2 horses. One was the black horse she had seen him gentling, and the other was a sturdy bay mare. "Morning," he said, looking pleased to see her. "This is Midnight," he gestured to the black horse, "and this beauty is Copper. She will be yours to ride." Jolene approached the mare cautiously and stroked her nose. The horse nickered softly and pushed into her hand, and Jolene felt a rush of affection. "She is lovely. She has a good temperament, steady and reliable." Quinton helped her secure her carpetbag to the saddle. "Have you ridden much?" "Not in years, but I used to ride when I was young." "It will come back to you." He gave her a reassuring smile. "Ready?" Jolene took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." They mounted up and rode out of Colorado City just as the sun was breaking over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Jolene did not look back. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. The ride to Pinewood took several hours. Quinton kept the pace easy, mindful of the fact that Jolene was not used to long rides. They followed a rough trail that wound through pine forests and open meadows, crossing crystal-clear streams and passing herds of pronghorn antelope. "It is beautiful out here," Jolene said as they paused to let the horses drink from a creek. "I forgot how much I missed being away from town." "Wait until you see the land I am claiming," Quinton said. "There is a natural spring and good grass for cattle, and the view of the mountains will take your breath away." They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing easily. Quinton told her about growing up on his father's ranch in Texas, learning everything about horses and cattle from the time he could walk. He spoke about his mother, who had died when he was 15, and his father, who had passed just 2 years ago. Jolene found herself opening up in return, telling him about her childhood, about her mother's death when she was 10, and how her father had tried his best but never really recovered from the loss. She talked about the small farm they had owned, how happy she had been before everything fell apart. I have not talked about these things in years, she admitted. It feels strange, but good too. Sometimes it helps to remember the good parts, Quinton said. Otherwise, the pain is all there is. They reached Pinewood in the early afternoon. It was barely a settlement, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. A general store, a blacksmith, a small church, and a few scattered homesteads. But it was peaceful and clean, and Jolene felt something in her chest ease. Quinton took her to meet the land agent, a friendly man named Mr. Patterson, who handled homestead claims for the area. He showed them maps and explained the requirements. Quinton would need to build a dwelling, cultivate a certain amount of land, and live on the property for 5 years to gain full ownership. "And who is this young lady?" Mr. Patterson asked, glancing at Jolene with curiosity. "This is Miss Jolene Jenkins," Quinton said smoothly. "She is going to be helping me establish the homestead." Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but he was too polite to comment. They finalized the paperwork, and Quinton officially claimed 160 acres of land about 3 miles east of Pinewood. As they rode toward the property, Jolene felt her nervousness returning. What was she doing? She had just ridden off into the wilderness with a man she barely knew, based on nothing but a feeling and a desperate need to escape her old life. She must be insane. Then they crested a rise, and she saw the land stretched out before them. Rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers, stands of tall pines, and in the distance, the magnificent peaks of the Rocky Mountains, still capped with snow despite the summer heat. A creek sparkled in the sunlight, winding through the property like a silver ribbon. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, it is perfect." Quinton's face lit up with pleasure. "I thought you would like it. See that flat area near the creek? That is where I am planning to build the house. And there," he pointed to a meadow, "that is good grazing land. I am thinking we start with about 20 head of cattle. See how they do." They dismounted and walked around the property, Quinton pointing out various features and sharing his plans. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Jolene found herself caught up in the vision. She could imagine a small house with a porch, a garden where she could grow vegetables, maybe some chickens scratching in a yard. "Where will I stay while we are building?" she asked, suddenly practical. Quinton looked a bit sheepish. "I was thinking we could set up a couple of tents for now. I know it is not ideal, but it should not take more than a month to get a basic cabin built. I have done it before, and I can hire some men from Pinewood to help. Will that be all right?" A month of living in a tent would have seemed impossible just days ago, but now it felt like an adventure. "It will be fine," she said, surprising herself with her confidence. They set up camp that afternoon. Quinton had brought 2 tents, supplies, and tools. He insisted that Jolene take the larger tent and set it up a respectful distance from his own, making it clear that he meant to honor the arrangement. They were employer and employee, nothing more, at least for now. As the sun set, Quinton built a fire and cooked a simple meal of beans and bacon. They sat on logs and ate, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "Thank you," Jolene said quietly, "for giving me this chance. I will work hard, I promise." "I know you will," Quinton said, "but you do not have to thank me. This is good for both of us. I needed help and you needed a fresh start. It works out." But it felt like more than that, at least to Jolene. It felt like fate, like something bigger than either of them had brought them together. She did not say that, though. It was too soon, too much. That night, lying in her tent and listening to the sounds of the wilderness around her, Jolene felt more at peace than she had in years. Yes, she was sleeping on the ground. Yes, she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But she was free. Really, truly free for the first time since her father died. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Quinton hired 3 men from Pinewood to help with the construction. 2 brothers named Tom and Jim Walker, and an older man called Dutch. They worked from sunup to sundown, felling trees, stripping logs, and building the frame of a cabin. Jolene threw herself into helping however she could. She cooked meals for the work crew, hauled water from the creek, and learned how to chink logs with mud and moss. The work was exhausting and her hands blistered, but she did not complain. This was her new life, and she was determined to earn her place in it. Quinton was a patient teacher, showing her how to do things without making her feel stupid for not knowing. He taught her how to properly saddle a horse, how to identify different plants and which ones were edible, how to read the weather in the clouds. He was kind but not condescending, treating her like a capable partner rather than a helpless woman. And somewhere in those long, hard days, Jolene realized she was falling in love with him. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning bolt. It was gradual, built out of small moments. The way he always made sure she had enough to eat before he took his own portion. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. The way he smiled when he saw her successfully accomplish a new task, his pride in her achievements genuine and warm. She tried to hide her feelings, afraid of ruining the fragile balance they had achieved. Quinton had offered her a job, not a romance, and she did not want him to think she had misunderstood or was trying to take advantage. But it was hard, especially when he would stand close to show her something, and she could smell the clean scent of him, sweat and leather and pine. Or when he would catch her eye across the campfire and smile, and her heart would skip a beat. One evening, about 3 weeks into the building process, Tom Walker made a comment that changed everything. "So, Quinton, when are you two going to make it official?" Tom asked casually as they were cleaning up after dinner. Quinton looked confused. "Make what official, you know?" Tom gestured between Quinton and Jolene. "You and the lady. Everyone in Pinewood is talking about how you two are living out here together. Figured you would be getting married soon to make it proper." Jolene felt her face flame red. "We are not, it is not like that. I work for Mr. Zimmerman, that is all." Tom raised his hands apologetically. "Sorry, did not mean to offend. Just figured, with you being out here alone and all." After the men left for their own homesteads, an awkward silence fell over the camp. Jolene busied herself with washing the dishes in a bucket, keeping her back to Quinton. "Jolene," he said finally, "I am sorry about that. I should have thought about how it would look, you being here. I did not mean to damage your reputation." "My reputation was already damaged," she said, trying to sound light. "Being a saloon girl takes care of that. You are not a saloon girl anymore. You are a homesteader, a hard worker, and you deserve respect." She turned to face him, still holding a wet plate. "It does not matter what I deserve, Quinton. People will think what they want to think." He stood up and walked over to her, his expression serious. "It matters to me. I do not want anyone thinking poorly of you because of me." They were standing close, closer than they usually stood, and Jolene could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. "What if," Quinton said slowly, like he was thinking through each word, "what if we did make it official?" "What do you mean?" she whispered, though she thought she knew. What if we got married? For real, not just for appearances." He took a deep breath. "I know it is fast and maybe it is crazy, but Jolene, these past few weeks with you have been the happiest I have been in a long time. You are smart and strong and braver than you give yourself credit for. I would be proud to have you as my wife, if you would have me." Jolene felt tears spring to her eyes. "You do not have to do this just to protect my reputation. I am not." He reached out and gently took the plate from her hands, setting it aside, then took both of her hands in his. "I am asking because I have fallen in love with you." I tried to keep things professional, but I cannot help it. You have become important to me, Jolene, more important than I knew a person could be. I love you too, she said, the words tumbling out. I have been trying so hard not to, but I do. I love you, Quinton. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and she buried her face against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady. When she looked up, he cupped her face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet, like she was something precious. Will you marry me? He asked again when they finally pulled apart. Will you be my wife and my partner and help me build a life here? Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married a week later in the small church in Pinewood, with Tom and Jim Walker and their families as witnesses. Jolene wore the best dress she owned, a simple green cotton that Martha had given her as a goodbye present. Quinton wore clean clothes and actually shaved, and he looked so handsome it made her heart ache. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a traveling circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. But when Quinton slipped a simple gold band on her finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days, Jolene felt like the luckiest woman alive. She was Jolene Zimmerman now, a married woman with a home and a future. The scared saloon girl from Colorado City felt like a different person, someone from another lifetime. After the ceremony, the Walker family hosted a small celebration at their homestead. There was fiddle music and dancing and more food than Jolene had seen in months. The community of Pinewood might have been small, but the people were warm and welcoming, accepting her as one of their own without judgment. I am so happy, Jolene told Quinton as they danced under the stars. I did not think I could ever be this happy. Get used to it, he said, pulling her closer, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay this way. They spent their wedding night in the newly finished cabin. It was small and simple, just 2 rooms, but Quinton had made sure the bedroom had a real bed frame and a thick mattress stuffed with fresh straw and covered with quilts. He had even installed a window that looked out over the meadow and the mountains beyond. Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman, he said, carrying her over the threshold. Home, she repeated, savoring the word. I like the sound of that. Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Quinton worked on building up the ranch, starting with the 20 head of cattle he had planned. He also broke and trained horses, which brought in good money from surrounding ranchers who needed reliable mounts. His skill with difficult horses became legendary in the area, and people would travel for miles to have him work with their animals. Jolene managed the household and helped with the lighter ranch work. She learned to milk their 2 cows, tend the chickens, and maintain a large vegetable garden. She also discovered she had a talent for making cheese and preserving food, skills that would be essential for getting through the harsh Colorado winters. But more than the work, they enjoyed each other's company. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Quinton taught her to read better, as her education had been cut short, and she taught him to appreciate poetry, reading aloud from a worn book she had kept from her childhood. They made love with tenderness and passion, discovering each other slowly, building intimacy along with their ranch. Jolene had been afraid at first, worried that she would not know what to do or that she would disappoint him, but Quinton was patient and gentle, always making sure she felt safe and cherished. You are beautiful, he would tell her, tracing patterns on her skin. So beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. You are just saying that, she would protest, but he would kiss her protests away. I am saying it because it is true, he would insist. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, inside and out. By fall, they had a thriving homestead. The cattle were healthy, the garden had produced an abundant harvest, and they had even managed to save a little money. More importantly, they had built a real home together, filled with love and laughter. In October, Jolene realized she had not had her monthly courses in 2 months. At first, she thought it was just stress or the change in her lifestyle, but when her breasts became tender and she started feeling nauseous in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. She was both thrilled and terrified. They had not been married that long, and she worried about whether she would be a good mother. Her own mother had died when she was young, and she had no sisters or close female relatives to guide her. But when she told Quinton, his reaction chased away her fears. A baby. He said, his face breaking into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," she confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "Around next May, I think." He picked her up and spun her around, kissing her soundly. "This is the best news ever. You are going to be an amazing mother, Jolene." "How do you know?" she asked, suddenly vulnerable. "Because I see how you care for everything around you. The chickens, the garden, even that stray cat that showed up last week. You have so much love to give, and our child is going to be so lucky to have you." The winter was hard but not unbearable. They had prepared well, with plenty of food stored and enough firewood to last through the cold months. The cattle survived on hay Quinton had cut and stored in the barn, and the chickens were snug in their coop. Jolene's pregnancy progressed well, though she was often tired and the morning sickness lasted longer than she would have liked. Quinton was attentive and caring, taking over more of the household tasks and making sure she rested when she needed to. Mrs. Walker, Tom's wife, became a good friend and mentor. She had 4 children of her own and plenty of advice to share. She taught Jolene how to knit baby clothes and what to expect during labor, preparing her as much as anyone could be prepared for bringing a new life into the world. As the snow melted and spring arrived, Jolene grew large and uncomfortable. She could not wait to meet her baby, but she was also anxious about the birth. Women died in childbirth all the time, especially out in the frontier where medical help was scarce. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked Quinton one night as they lay in bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Nothing is going to go wrong," he said firmly, though she could hear the fear beneath his confidence. "Mrs. Walker will be here, and she has helped deliver dozens of babies. You are strong and healthy. Everything will be fine. Promise me something," Jolene said. "If something does happen to me, promise you will make sure our baby knows I loved them, that I wanted them so much. Jolene, do not talk like that. Promise me." He pulled her close as her belly would allow. "I promise, but you are going to be fine. You are going to raise this baby yourself, and we are going to have a dozen more, and we are going to grow old together on this ranch. That is what is going to happen." She wanted to believe him, and mostly she did. When the labor pains started on a warm May afternoon, Quinton immediately rode to fetch Mrs. Walker. The older woman arrived quickly, calm and competent, sending Quinton outside to pace and boil water and generally stay out of the way. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Jolene had never experienced such pain, and there were moments when she thought she could not bear it. But Mrs. Walker talked her through it, wiping her face with cool cloths and encouraging her to push when the time came. Finally, as the sun rose on a beautiful May morning, Jolene heard the most wonderful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Walker announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Jolene's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Jolene looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect fingers and the dark fuzz of hair on his head, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Mrs. Walker went to get Quinton, and he burst into the room looking terrified and hopeful at the same time. When he saw Jolene sitting up in bed, alive and well with their son in her arms, he nearly collapsed with relief. "A son," Jolene said, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son, Quinton." He sat on the edge of the bed and carefully touched the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers wrapped around his father's finger, and Quinton's eyes filled with tears. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Jolene. Thank you for this gift." They named him Quinn Joshua Zimmerman, Quinn after his father and Joshua after Jolene's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and what promised to be his mother's dark hair. The first few months were exhausting as they adjusted to parenthood. Jolene was constantly feeding Quinn or changing him or walking him when he was fussy. Quinton helped as much as he could, taking the baby in the evening so Jolene could sleep, walking with him at night when he would not settle. "I never knew a person could be this tired and this happy at the same time," Jolene said one night, watching Quinton rock their son to sleep. "It is worth it," Quinton said softly. "Every sleepless night, every moment of worry, it is all worth it to have him here." As Quinn grew, the ranch prospered. Quinton's reputation as a horse trainer continued to grow, and they were able to expand their herd of cattle. They built a larger barn and added rooms to the cabin. Other families began homesteading nearby, and Pinewood grew from a tiny settlement into a proper small town with a school and a church, and even a small hospital. When Quinn was 2 years old, Jolene discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In the spring of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Julia Marie, after both their mothers. She had Quinton's dark hair and Jolene's blue eyes and a sunny disposition that won everyone's heart. Life was not always easy. There were drought years when the grass turned brown and they worried about the cattle. There were harsh winters when they were snowed in for weeks at a time. There were illnesses and injuries and the normal struggles of frontier life. But through it all, Jolene and Quinton faced everything together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. They never forgot where they had started, how they had both been broken and lost when they found each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinton took Jolene back to the creek where they had first really talked, leaving the children with the Walkers for the evening. "You remember sitting here?" he asked as they watched the water flow by, the same way it had a decade ago. "I was so nervous that day, trying to figure out how to ask you to come work for me without it sounding improper." "I was terrified," Jolene admitted. "I wanted so badly to believe you were sincere, but I had learned not to trust easily. I am glad you took the chance. I am glad you trusted me. You gave me a new life, Quinton. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a family and a home, and most importantly, you gave me love. Real love, the kind I had stopped believing existed. You gave me just as much," he said, taking her hand. "You made this ranch a home instead of just a place to work. You gave me children and laughter and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." They sat together as the sun set, just like they had on so many evenings before, comfortable in their silence and their love. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and more blessings. Quinn grew into a smart, kind boy who loved working with the horses just like his father. Julia was bright and spirited, always asking questions and exploring the world around her. In 1885, they had another son, James, and in 1887, a final daughter, Lucy. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and even more for the exceptional horses Quinton trained. People came from all over Colorado, and even from neighboring territories, to buy horses from the Zimmerman ranch. But despite their success, Quinton and Jolene never forgot their humble beginnings. They were known for their kindness and generosity, always willing to help a neighbor in need. When a family's barn burned down, Quinton organized the community to build a new one. When illness struck and someone could not work, Jolene made sure they had food and whatever they needed. Jolene occasionally thought about her life back in Colorado City, about the scared young woman who had poured drinks at the Crystal Palace and dreamed of escape. That person felt like a stranger now, someone she had been in another lifetime. One day, when Julia was about 14, she asked Jolene about her past. "Mama, Mrs. Walker said something about you working in a saloon before you met Papa. Is that true?" Jolene considered lying, preserving the image of respectability, but she had promised herself long ago never to be ashamed of her story. "Yes, it is true. I worked as a saloon girl in Colorado City after my father died and I had nowhere else to go. What was it like?" Julia asked, curious rather than judgmental. "It was hard and often frightening. Men were not always kind or respectful, but I survived it and it taught me to be strong. And it led me to your father, which led me to this life and to you children. So I cannot regret it, even though it was difficult." "You are brave, Mama," Julia said simply. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Jolene hugged her daughter tight, grateful beyond words for how her life had turned out. As the years went on and the children grew, Quinton and Jolene faced the normal challenges of aging. Quinton's joints ached on cold mornings from years of hard work. Jolene's dark hair turned silver, and she moved a bit slower than she once had. But they were healthy and content, surrounded by the family and community they had built. Quinn married a sweet girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far end of the property, working the ranch alongside Quinton. Julia married a teacher who had come to Pinewood, and they settled in town where she opened a small bakery. James and Lucy were still young, but they were growing fast, full of dreams and possibilities. On a clear autumn evening in 1895, 17 years after they had first met, Jolene and Quinton sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their children and grandchildren, 4 so far with more surely coming, had just left after a big Sunday dinner. The house was quiet again, the way it had been in the early days. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Jolene asked, taking Quinton's hand. "If that drunk cowboy had not started shooting that night, or if you had not been at the saloon, or if I had been too afraid to take a chance." "All the time," Quinton admitted. "I think about how close I came to missing out on this life. On you. It terrifies me sometimes how easily it could have all gone differently. But it did not. We found each other and we built something beautiful." "We did," he agreed, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. The saloon girl and the drifting cowboy making a life together against all odds. "Not a saloon girl anymore," Jolene said with a smile. "Mrs. Zimmerman, successful rancher and mother of 4. My wife," Quinton said softly. "My partner, my love. The best decision I ever made was offering you that job, and the second best was asking you to marry me." "The best decision I ever made was saying yes," Jolene replied. "To both." They sat together as the stars began to emerge, holding hands the way they had on countless evenings before. The ranch was quiet except for the gentle sounds of horses in the barn and cattle in the distant pasture. This was their kingdom, built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. "I love you, Jolene Zimmerman," Quinton said, his voice still strong despite his years. "I love you, Quinton Zimmerman," she replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." And as the night deepened around them, they remained there together, two people who had found each other when they both needed saving and had built a lifetime of happiness from that chance meeting so many years ago. The saloon girl who had wanted a fresh start had gotten exactly that, along with something even better. A love that would last until the end of their days, and a family that would carry on their legacy for generations to come. The years continued, blessed and full. Quinn and Sarah eventually took over the main operations of the ranch, allowing Quinton and Jolene to step back and enjoy their grandchildren. They stayed in the original cabin, the one Quinton had built with his own hands, because it held too many precious memories to ever leave. Jolene started a women's group in Pinewood, teaching younger women skills like preserving food, managing household accounts, and raiding. She never preached at them, but her story became quietly known, how she had escaped a difficult situation and built a new life. She became a source of hope for any woman who felt trapped, proof that circumstances did not have to define your entire life. Quinton continued training horses well into his 60s, though he took on less demanding work. He taught his methods to Quinn and to other young men in the area, passing on his knowledge and his gentle philosophy. "Respect the animal, and it will respect you back," he would always say. "Fear and force only create more of the same." They celebrated 25 years of marriage with a huge party that brought people from all over the region. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends and neighbors who had become like family. Tom and Jim Walker, now old men themselves, gave speeches about how Quinton and Jolene had been part of Pinewood since almost the beginning, helping build the community into what it had become. "To love and hard work," Tom toasted, raising his glass. "May we all be blessed with both." As Jolene looked around the room at all the faces, at the life she and Quinton had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the frightened girl she had been, ducking behind the bar as bullets flew, thinking she had no future worth living for. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, that happiness and love were just around the corner, she would. But maybe she did not need to go back. Maybe she could be that message for someone else, proof that it was never too late to start over, never too late to choose a different path. In the winter of 1898, Jolene caught a bad cold that turned into pneumonia. For several frightening weeks, Quinton barely left her side, caring for her with the same gentle patience he showed his horses. Their children took turns sitting with her, and the local doctor visited regularly. Slowly, painfully, she recovered. But the illness left her weaker than before, and she knew she was no longer the strong young woman who had helped build a ranch from nothing. "I am not ready to leave you," she told Quinton one evening as she recovered. "We have too much living left to do." "Then do not leave," he said simply, holding her hand. "Stay with me. We will go slow, take our time, but stay with me, Jolene." "I will," she promised. "As long as I can, I will stay," and she did. She regained her strength slowly, and though she never quite returned to her former vigor, she was able to enjoy her life and her family. She played with her grandchildren, taught them songs and stories, and loved them fiercely. She sat on the porch with Quinton on warm evenings, and they reminisced about their years together, remembering both the hard times and the good. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, their family had grown to include 12 grandchildren with more on the way. The ranch was thriving under Quinn's management, and Pinewood had become a proper town with a railroad connection and regular mail service. The wild frontier they had known was slowly being tamed, but the spirit of those early days remained in the people who had built their lives there. 30 years, Jolene said, shaking her head in wonder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you walked into the Crystal Palace, and sometimes it feels like I have known you my entire life." "Both can be true," Quinton said. The best things in life have a way of feeling both brand new and ancient at the same time. They renewed their vows that day in the church in Pinewood, the same small building where they had first married 3 decades earlier. They spoke the same promises, but with the weight of experience behind them now. They knew what those vows meant in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. They had lived those words, and they would continue to live them for whatever time they had left. As Jolene stood there, holding Quinton's hands and looking into his eyes, she felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt all those years ago. He was older now, his dark hair completely silver, lines etched deep around his eyes and mouth. But he was still her Quinton, still the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had offered her hope when she had none. "I love you," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I will always love you." "And I love you," he replied. "My Jolene, my heart, my home." Their story became something of a legend in Pinewood and the surrounding area. The saloon girl and the cowboy, people would say, who built one of the finest ranches in Colorado. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy, working the land and raising families of their own, always remembering the values Quinton and Jolene had instilled. Hard work, kindness, respect, and most of all, love. Jolene lived to see her first great-grandchild born in 1910, a little girl that Quinn's son named Jolene in her honor. She held the tiny baby in her arms and felt the circle of life continuing, her legacy carried forward in this new generation. "Your name means something," she told the baby, even though the infant could not understand. "It means you can overcome anything. It means you are stronger than you know. It means you are loved." Quinton remained healthy and strong well into his 70s, still riding every day and working with horses. He would joke that the horses kept him young, that as long as he had work to do, his body would keep going. On a peaceful morning in the spring of 1915, 37 years after they had first met, Jolene woke early to watch the sunrise from their porch. Quinton was still sleeping, and she did not want to disturb him. She wrapped a quilt around her shoulders and sat in her favorite chair, watching the sky turn from black to deep blue to pink and gold. She thought about her life, about all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. If someone had told her back when she was serving drinks at the Crystal Palace that she would end up here with a loving husband, 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, she would have thought them mad. But here she was, living proof that miracles could happen. That one person's kindness could change everything. That it was never too late to start over, never too late to find love. When Quinton woke and found her on the porch, he joined her with his own cup of coffee. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the ranch come to life as the sun rose higher. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. "Everything," she said simply. "Our whole life together, how lucky I am, how grateful." "I am the lucky one," he insisted. "You made my life worth living, Jolene. You gave me purpose and joy and more love than any man deserves." "We gave it to each other," she corrected. "That is how it works. That is how it has always worked with us." They lived several more years together, each day precious, each moment treasured. They watched their grandchildren grow, and their great-grandchildren take their first steps. They celebrated holidays and birthdays, survived illnesses and injuries, and held each other through the inevitable losses that came with growing old. Jolene passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1918, at the age of 62. She simply went to bed one night, kissed Quinton goodnight like she had thousands of times before, and did not wake up. The doctor said her heart had given out, worn down by years of hard work and that bout of pneumonia that had never quite left her lungs clear. Quinton was devastated. But he also took comfort in the fact that she had not suffered, had not lingered in pain. She had lived a full, rich life and had died peacefully in the home they had built together. He lived for 5 more years, cared for by his children and grandchildren, still riding and working with horses almost until the end. He never remarried. "There was only ever one woman for me," he would say when anyone suggested it. "I had my great love. Not everyone is that blessed." He passed away in 1923 at the age of 75, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch, looking out at the mountains he had loved. His family found him there, a peaceful expression on his face, and they knew he had gone to join his Jolene. They were buried side by side in the cemetery in Pinewood, under a large oak tree with a view of the mountains. Their headstone was simple but meaningful: Quinton and Jolene Zimmerman. They built a life from love. Their descendants continued to work the ranch for generations, keeping the land in the family and maintaining the traditions Quinton and Jolene had established. The story of how they met, how a drifting cowboy had offered a desperate saloon girl a chance at a new life, was passed down through the years, becoming part of the family lore. And in Pinewood, where the original cabin still stood as a historical landmark, people would tell the story to visitors about the saloon girl who wanted a fresh start, and the cowboy who gave her a new life and his last name, and how together they built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their years. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged through hard work and dedication, and sealed with a devotion that transcended time itself. And though Quinton and Jolene were long gone, their love remained, living on in the land they had claimed, the family they had raised, and the community they had helped build. The end of their story was not sad, because they had lived fully and loved completely. They had taken their chance when it was offered, had chosen each other every day for nearly 4 decades, and had built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And that really was all anyone could ask for from life: to love and be loved, to build something meaningful, and to leave the world a little better than you found it. Quinton and Jolene Zimmerman had done all of that and more. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a life well lived. And in the end, that was the greatest happy ending of all.